In the last couple of months, we have not stopped hearing about Trump and anti-Semitism, mainly him labelling all Democrats as anti-Semites. You know, he says the Democrats hate Jews. He says that on Twitter, you know, pretty much regularly, and all his buddies back him up. And I wanted to take this video to point out why Republicans and Trump love Israel and why their supporters love Israel. And I'm going to show how their love for Israel isn't because they love Jews or they love Israel really. It's because they see Israel and the Jewish people as a stepping stone to Armageddon. This sounds like a crazy belief, but people like Mike Pompeo believe this. And I'm going to get into how extremely anti-Semitic this is, way worse than anything any Democrat has ever said or believed in, especially people like Ilhan Omar and critics of Israel, people who have legit grievances with the actions of the Israeli government. Because Israel is an in part democracy. You know, if you're Jewish, you can vote and there's different parties. And not every, you know, leader of Israel has been totally insane, like Bibi, and not all of them have been as bad as Netanyahu. And it just goes to show how ludicrous Trump's statement that Jews are disloyal if they vote Democrat, disloyal to Israel. Do you know what I mean? You can be a Jew in Israel and vote against the government. Does that mean you're disloyal to Israel? It makes totally no sense, but again, plays into anti-Semitic tropes that Jewish people aren't essentially loyal to the country they live in, but it puts a little spin on it where to be loyal to the country you're living in, you must pledge allegiance to not only America, but Israel as well. So lately, Trump has really gone off the deep end. He seems to be getting crazier. And he said that, you know, he was the chosen one while looking up at the sky. I guess God's chosen one. He quoted someone saying that Trump was king of the Jews. And then, of course, he said that stuff about Jews who vote Democrat are disloyal. The guy who cries about Democrats apparently being anti-Semitic all the time and hating Jews makes the most casual anti-Semitic remarks and literally declares himself the Jewish king. Do you know what I mean? Like, how can anyone have a leg to stand on when you're talking like this? Now, I don't think Trump believes in a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, but he's really bought into this Kool-Aid because Trump is the most popular president with white evangelicals. He got 81% of white evangelical voters to vote for him in 2016. That beats any other Republican president, even Reagan. So it just shows you how crazy they are for Trump. So as we all know, some of the most crazy people in America are white evangelicals. They're racist, you know, it's really intertwined with white nationalism. But something white evangelicals do is they fetishize the state of Israel because it is part of biblical prophecy. So Trump largely talks about Israel because of his base. So Israel is key to the biblical apocalypse. White evangelicals believe that when Israel go to war with heathens, it will trigger Armageddon. So why do evangelicals bang the war drums for Iran so much? A lot of them think when Israel and Iran go into battle, it's going to trigger the end of the world. So in the Bible, there are numerous apocalypses. It's different takes on the end of the world, but something that's pretty consistent in the New Testament is Jesus will come down with the armies of heaven and crush the forces of evil. So when this all was written, you know, 50, 100 years, maybe 200 years after Jesus died, the Christians saw the Romans as the army of evil, and Jesus would come down with the armies of heaven and crush them. And he would lift up all of those who believed in him. He would raise the souls from the dead. They'd be lifted up into the sky in New Jerusalem. And of course, it's pretty wild, it's pretty crazy. Obviously, there's many different interpretations of what it will be, but you know, in the literal interpretation, that's what happens. Now, what happens to the Jews in this scenario? Well, the Jews can either convert or they can just die with the rest of them and burn in hell for all eternity. So wouldn't you say that supporting Israel as much as you can just to trigger Armageddon, in which most Jews will be killed and then burn in hell for all eternity, is far more anti-Semitic than saying that the actions of the Israeli government are like fascist or authoritarian or just, you know, generally awful? What do you think is more anti-Semitic? The latter is not even anti-Semitic, but if we're making an equivocation between the two, it's obvious one is deeply, deeply anti-Semitic and just sees Jews as this sort of token people to help you get to the afterlife and help your biblical prophecy come true. Now, there is also another element to this. White evangelicals see Israel as their spiritual homeland. They actually believe themselves to be the sort of new Jews. They are the new chosen people. The Jews used to be, but then God amended it in his new covenant in the New Testament. There is even a strand of white evangelicism which is called Christian Zionism. It basically just believes that, the re-establishment of the state of Israel is an important stepping stone into getting Armageddon and to getting, the biblical apocalypse. So that all sounds incredibly anti-Semitic, doesn't it? They essentially just want to use Israel and the Jews to trigger the end of the world, in which most Jewish people will die if they don't convert to Christianity, and then they'll all rot in hell for all eternity. That sounds a lot worse than criticising the Israeli state for killing Palestinians. But it also helps you understand the mindset of white Christians who historically have been the biggest tormentors and persecutors of the Jews. So throughout the medieval period, you had the Jews being expelled from various different countries, whether that is England, France, Spain, and then you had them being slaughtered in other places like Hungary. So for example, the First Crusade had an element to it called the People's Crusade, which was made up of peasants and people who weren't in the knightly class. But on their way to the Holy Land, they stopped off in Hungary and basically killed every single Jew they could find because the Jews had killed Jesus. And you can trace this sort of thinking throughout the ages, and you can even trace it to the Nazis, with Hitler convincing a lot of German Christians that the Jews deserved it because, of course, the Jews had killed Jesus. And then if you don't think this strain of Christianity in which they think the Jews killed Jesus and they hate them for it doesn't exist in white evangelicals, and doesn't exist in the Republican Party, you are really mistaken. I've just highlighted to you why they are supportive of Israel. And I've just highlighted to you how you can be extremely anti-Semitic, but still totally 100% back the state of Israel and back every action they do, because you just want to use them to get the apocalypse, and you are happy when they are provoking Arabs and provoking Iran, provoking all these people, because you are hoping it's going to bring about the end of the world. And what I find really funny talking about all this stuff is how we don't paint Christians and evangelicals as crazy as Muslim people. So, we always talk about, the crazy Muslims, they blow themselves up because they think they're going to heaven and they're going to get like 20 virgins, and look how insane they are and how insane you have to be to do that. But we literally have a party in America who love Israel because they want Israel to trigger the end of the world. And we don't think that's insane. And it's so normalised. And not only is it super insane, it's also super racist in 100 different ways, whether that is to Jews, whether that is to Muslims, whether that is to black people. It's not surprising that white nationalism in 2019 is pretty much reflective of Fox News, is pretty much reflective of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. They go together like that. It's not like, oh my God, how could they misinterpret what these guys are saying? It's nothing like that. The GOP, in my opinion, are literally the party of white supremacy. And they have been for a long time, but now it's just clear and out in the open. Trump has galvanised all the crazies. There's a reason he attracts just absolutely insane people. And absolutely insane Christians who believe this stuff. And the final point I want to end on, a lot of people say, if you're a real Christian, how can you support Donald Trump? How can you support a guy who's been divorced 3 times? How can you support a guy who's such a pervert? How can you support a guy who's such a warmonger? How can you support a guy who locks kids up in cages? Well, through the mindset of the people I've been describing, they see Donald Trump as a tool. They see him as God's tool on earth to help Israel and therefore trigger the apocalypse. I'm not joking, they actually think that. They think Trump's support of Israel to this extent is fulfilling biblical prophecy. So although he's a horrible person and he's not a true Christian, and a lot of these Christians probably do know this as well in their hearts when they think about their religion, even though it's an awful religion, they know Donald Trump doesn't fit the description of people like Jesus or any of the prophets. But again, they think God is working through Donald Trump to deliver them the end times and to deliver them New Jerusalem. And people think the Republicans don't represent Christianity, but I think they do represent Christianity in my opinion. They've read the Bible in the way it was written a lot of times. It's a literal interpretation, but it's the same thing I believe about Islamic fundamentalists. People say, no Muslim could be a terrorist. So I'm like, they're literally reading the Quran and then doing what it tells them. The same way these Christians who are supporting Trump, they're reading the apocalypse in the Bible and being like, oh yeah, maybe Trump bringing the apocalypse is what God wanted, because, you know, he seems to be speeding it along. But anyway, that is all for this video, just outlining how Trump is extremely anti-Semitic and how all these white evangelicals only love Israel for anti-Semitic reasons. If you like the video, please leave a like and maybe subscribe to the channel. If you want to find me on social media, follow me at The Tabernacle on both Twitter and Instagram. If you want to read some of my writing, please check out my WordPress blog. The link is in the description. I also have a Patreon now, and thanks to all my patrons, and that is in the description as well. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.